My name's Tim Hamrich. I have the pleasure of hosting webinars. I've hosted webinars with Fractal for a while. I'm not an employee of Fractal. In fact, I have nothing here to sell you or pitch you at all. In fact, I think that's why they bring me on here, because I'm just interested in having productive conversations, transparent conversations that are helpful. And I think that's what Fractal, Uncommon Farms, and Sound Ag all wanted to have happen this morning. Not a product pitch, but a real insight into what a farmer is going through. And we'll have one farmer that's going to kind of share his experiences and what that means for how he's responding and the decisions he's making on his farm. I've been able to have these types of interviews for about 8 years now. And even though we have more content hitting us from all angles today than ever, it still is clear that what most people want to know is just like, okay, what are my peers doing? What are they thinking? How are they handling things? And that's what today's all about. We have Kyle Maiman on. Kyle is with MBS Family Farms in Iowa, a successful family-owned, family-operated corn and soybean operation in Plainfield, Iowa. Kyle, and that's in the northeast part of the state, right, Kyle?
Correct.
Yep. Kyle and his family are ardent stewards of their land, leaning into sustainability balanced with profitability. I've had the chance to interview Kyle, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 times, something like that. And I always learn something new. And so I'm excited to have that conversation with him here today. I'll just introduce the other voices you're going to be hearing from before we officially dive in. Caitlin Fitzgerald is from Sound Agriculture. Caitlin's the VP of Sustainability at Sound, working at the intersection of commercial and impact initiatives to support Sound's mission to create nature-based solutions that lead to more sustainable and healthier food. She started her career in asset management before transitioning to the ag-tech space, where she's held a variety of roles across product, business development, and strategy. Also joining us is Dave Bryden of Uncommon Farms. Hey, Dave. Dave has been with Uncommon Farms for over 15 years, serving its farm members on all topics related to adding and leasing land and serving landowners. He has developed over a dozen training courses on landowner relations and business development for the members of Uncommon Farms, and enjoys one-on-one strategy of such situations with farmers the most. And then also joining us here, we have Brian Gruntner from Fractal Ag. Brian leads farmer engagement at Fractal, where he works directly with farmers to help reinvest capital back into their operations. He has experience developing sales and growth strategy for companies in and outside of agriculture, including IBM, Centera, and Leaf Agriculture. Prior to this experience, Brian served as a psychological operations non-commissioned officer with the U.S. Army Special Operations Command and received his MBA from the University of Minnesota. Very, very cool. Well, let's just dive right in here, Kyle. I think everybody is kind of coming at this with some similar context about the current state of the farm economy. I think those poll questions were telling and what people are concerned about. But I would just love to hear from your perspective. Catch us up on, maybe how this season has gone and what things are looking like as 2025 starts to shape up.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Always appreciate being on these types of things with you. So, 2024 for us was a very dry season. We were kind of the epicenter in Iowa of a dry crop. And this past year has been, kind of a tale of two cities as far as weather is concerned. Wet early and then dry late. And so, while I still think that the nationwide crop could be, they're predicting record breaking, and I think that from what I understand, it certainly could be. I don't know that my operation will be. I think we are probably are hoping for closer to APH, and as we've gotten into harvest here a little bit this week, that's kind of where it's starting to shape up. So not a great year, not a bad year, but certainly in my area, I will not be able to out yield my inadequate marketing. Let's put it that way. So, and sometimes your yields will bail you out from that perspective. So, it's going to be a fairly thin year here in 24. And the problem is that as you look into putting it together 2025 budgets, I talk with folks about this different times. It sucks. It sucks to put together budgets that you hope that you can break even around. But in leaner times, really, that just being able to break even is a win.
Absolutely. Sorry, taking a bunch of notes here of things we can get to that you just mentioned. And before I get ahead of myself, maybe I shared a little bit of high level about your farm, Kyle. Maybe if you could just share a little bit more so people have some context about what you're looking at. And then I want to dive into those budgets and how you're thinking about things.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, Tim. I am a fifth generation farmer here in Plainfield, Iowa. Plainfield is just north of Waterloo, where John Deere tractors are made. I farm here with my family, my wife, and my parents, and also with a host of really really great employees. Farm both in Iowa and then also into southern Minnesota, near Austin and Albert Lee there as well. And so we do get a little bit of benefit and I guess detriment of multiple locations and different weather patterns. But we're fairly vanilla corn and soybeans. Most of our soybeans actually we sell for a premium of some sort, either a non-GMO premium or a seed premium. We grow seed soybeans for almost everybody you can think of. And so yeah, we're fairly vanilla, but nothing we love better than farming.
Yeah. And I want to tell everybody who's in attendance here, I have the pleasure of asking questions, but that doesn't mean the questions need to come from me. If you have any questions at all for Kyle, you can put them in the chat. There's also, I believe, an icon where you can ask some questions. I know I have, mine might look a little bit different from everybody else's, but I have a questions tab. So if you have any questions at all, either find the chat, find the Q&A icon, and feel free to ask away to any of our panelists as we go throughout here today. Well, let's get back to this budgets comment that you made earlier, Kyle, about having to put together break-even budgets. What's that looking like for you as we prepare here for 2025?
Yeah, so we're just in the preliminary stages of putting together our 2025 budgets, and have started with some fall input purchasing here, and have a few fall products bought. Most of our rent negotiations are pretty well wrapped up, so we have a pretty good idea of where we're going to stand for that. But I say break even budgets. Sometimes you have to be as a farmer, you're always an eternal optimist, and so sometimes you have to tweak the tweak the yield and tweak the price number a little bit to truly make a break even. But you start to put together some of those things on the cost side. What's unfortunate about 2025 is that from a cost side, even though the revenue side of the business is really really taken a hit, and you have to be very optimistic to push that forward to break even. The input side of it always has a longer tail. It seems like it's very much slower to come around, and not just input, but expenses in general. It doesn't matter if it's iron or if it's inputs or even cash rents. It seems like it's awfully difficult for that to come around. And so I had an old landowner from Nebraska, and he said to me one time, I'll never forget this. He says, Kyle, sometimes there's years to buy a new disc, and sometimes there's years to just buy new disc blades. And going forward, this is probably going to be some years to just buy disc blades and get along with what we have.
Right. Well, and I think that's a good way of thinking about things, especially for those factors that you can control. But what about those that you have less control over? So, are you said your kind of landlord agreements are sort of set for next year. Have you been able to have those conversations with landlords, or how have you handled the economic changes with your landlords?
Yes. So those are always difficult conversations, but luckily we have a very good pool of landowners that have most of them been with us for quite a while, and a host of anywhere from families or heirs of families of farmers to more investor types, and so we have kind of a broad array of folks. But many of our leases actually are on a flex lease, so we have a fair base payment and then a bonus rent that has comes on top of that based on price and yield of a given year. And so that has been really helpful as we've had those negotiations. In fact, Dave and I have had several conversations around that. Has been very helpful early on when we started down that path. And over time, we've converted probably 75 to 80% of our leases to those types of arrangements. And so when things are really good, like they have been, probably the previous, 3 or 4 years, those landowners get to participate in a very nice revenue stream off of their farm. And then when things dial back or maybe a little bit thinner, sometimes it'll even come back just to our base rents. But it's a good ebb and flow for us, and seems to be one of the fairer ways that I know to be truly in the market. I've almost gotten to the point where I don't really like doing just straight cash rent leases, because that's all based on the information that we have at one moment in time. And at the end of the day, that's probably going to be unfair for somebody along the life cycle of that lease.
Yeah. And Dave, he mentioned for those listening at Uncommon Farms is where Dave works. Is it common? Is it common for farmers to have 75 to 80% of their leases in this kind of flex arrangement that Kyle has?
Definitely not common. That is definitely the aberration. They've done a phenomenal job in working with their landowners, getting them to understand how that flex lease is really beneficial to both parties. I'm a big advocate of it. It makes for the most fair rent payment to both sides, and also allows you to put longer term leases into place, which is very helpful for many farms as far as being able to do advanced planning, to know that they've got those acres secured under lease.
And I guess for both of you, Dave and Kyle, what does that look like to have that conversation? Obviously, not 100% of your landowners are doing that, but the majority of them are. So how does that conversation look? Kind of what's in it for them? Is it just sharing in the upside when things are good, or is there more to it than that?
Yeah, so there's Dave can answer this too, but there's 100 different flex lease formats and options, and for the most part, we really tried to standardize that at our operation, because for one, it's easier to track. I mean, there is some extra work in this and some extra transparency, but that's always something that we've really believed in with our owners, and have a lot of longer term relationships, and I think that's a lot of the reason for that. Really in the last downturn, Tim, is when we had a larger number of folks come over to the flex lease, because that conversation got to be where me saying, here's where we've been for a cash rent lease for a while, but obviously the environment is changing. Here is a way that I can stay in business, and but also it leaves you upside to get back to maybe where we have been during better times. And so the last time that we really had a downturn, I think, is when more of our leases got converted to this, and luckily we had better times, and the flex lease program quote unquote worked, and it made it so that that lease almost takes care of itself. And for us, Tim, it's just based on price and yield. We have, like I say, we have a base that we pay no matter what, and then it's based on price and the actual yield that comes off of the farm. And then there's 100 different ways to that you can calculate price, and none of them are right or wrong. For the most part, we have chosen to do something fairly simple, and we use the average of the spring and the fall insurance price. Nothing magical about that, but if you track that over time compared to a local price, it's going to be actually within a very small deviation of each other, and it's a very simple price to calculate, and something that's known across industry. So,
and Dave, I imagine in your role you see all sorts of different situations with landowners and cash renters, but is this a big part of what you're helping your farmer clients with? Is kind of either these flex arrangements or just kind of landlord issues in general? How are you seeing other people handle this right now?
Well, and kind of going back to your original question about getting those converted, I would just encourage everyone on the session here today, think of it as a process. you generally speaking, you can't go to a landowner, tell them about a flex lease one time and think they're going to jump on board. It's a process. And the analogy I like to use is, if I were your seed dealer and I came to Kyle and I said, hey, Kyle, I got this brand new hybrid. This thing's going to be great. You better buy some. Is he going to buy it the first year? Not at all. I come to it in the second year. I say, hey, you remember that hybrid I talked to you about last year? Oh, it was wonderful. You better buy some this year. Is he going to buy it this year? No. Now, the third year, now he's going to at least consider it, right? It's going to be the same song, second verse. It's a process. You need to kind of drip on them, provide information, there's all kinds of different articles and so forth on them. I provide that along with other things and actual lease review, and I'll give them talking points and kind of strategizing how to have that conversation with the landowner, because it's not something that most farmers do every day. And so when you don't do something all the time, you're not going to be as good at it. So those are hopefully kind of answered both your questions there a little bit at one time.
Yeah, I just wonder what happens when the current situation is not working out. The flex arrangement's not something that the landowners are willing to consider at that time. Are there other options, things that people need to be working on, looking at as they try to figure out, how am I going to make all this work?
Well, yes, and there was a time back in 2014, 15 where farms actually needed to go to landowners and ask for a rent reduction. And let's face it, guys, that's a difficult decision, or a difficult conversation to have, and difficult decision for them to potentially go along with. So how to potentially couch that is I say it's an all the time thing. You always need to be talking with your landowners. Always should be sharing with them information on input cost, on equipment cost, because they don't know. Some of them might know about the dip in the market prices. Do they know how far? Some do, many of them don't. Do they know that the input costs have not come down accordingly? I would bet almost anything that that they probably don't know, as a general rule. And so how else are they going to find this out unless you, as their tenant and farming partner, don't inform them and educate them on the different things that are going on. And why you want to do that is to hopefully get that landowner to be empathetic to your situation. And that's that's kind of the key. Remember, you're in a partnership with them in this whole farming project, and so treat them as such.
One other thing I'd just add to that quick, I'm an isms guy, right? So I've joked and I've said this before. I said, I talk about buying new discs, blades versus a new disc. But believe it or not, our farm is a for-profit operation. We are actually trying to make money at this. We're not a charity, nor do we think that we have to, have excessive, unfair relationships. But we are a for-profit organization. We are trying to make money at this. This is our livelihood. This is our business.
And maybe talk more about that. Just maybe we zoom outside of just landlords and talk about mindset. I mean, how I know when we've talked before, and we've talked when the farm economic picture looked a lot better. You had kind of this growth mindset. How are you able to maintain your mindset through this more challenging economic environment, Kyle?
Yeah. So, growth is different for everyone, and I just speak to what it means at our operation. I mean, I'm certainly not interested in growth just for growth's sake, but I just want to be sure that I'm well positioned in the event that there is an opportunity. Maybe there's a host of opportunities. If it's the farm next door becomes available for purchase, or if it is a neighbor down the road that is looking for a exit strategy that doesn't have an heir, and that can be more than just maybe a quarter section that he's farming. Maybe there's he's looking for an exit strategy for his entire operation. And just to have just to always be watching for those opportunities. My dad has always said, you're never going to find a deal unless you're looking for one. And so you just have to, kind of have your ear to the ground a bit. But I think that in downturn times is actually when there are probably more opportunities, but it's the most difficult time to take advantage of those opportunities because sometimes during those times I'm not sure I want what I have, let alone to grow more, because it's hard, right? It's difficult. So just to be well positioned ahead of time and just to always be forward thinking around that, for your finances and your cash positions I think just being mindful of when years are really really good, to make wise investments with your profits and do things that are going to make you sustainable long term so that you're in a really good position of strength or a stronger position when there is a downturn, because the fact is there's going to be a downturn. We know we've done analysis on our business, historical performance, financial analysis of our business back 30 years. And, there's ebbs and flows in our business, just like there is any other business. I mean, we're not immune to that at all. But typically the downturns historically will last, 2 to 3 years, and at the longest maybe up to 4 years, and those are not really fun years. I mean, 2 to 3 or 4 years of those downturns, I mean, there's no other way to say it. It sucks. I mean, it is awful. But as a farmer, I think you just have to be an eternal optimist and know that there will be brighter days. And so if you can get through that probably 2 to 3 year dip, that there will be better days. And so if there's opportunities that come along during that dip, I'm betting on that there's an upturn and that there is better financial times ahead.
Tim, just one thing I might throw in on that is, at Uncommon Farms, we've always believed that the time to grow, if you want to, and not everybody should, not everybody wants to, and that's okay. But the time to grow is when times are tough, because as Kyle was alluding to, that's when either people don't have the ability to do something or they might be too scared to do it. And so that's when sometimes opportunities present themselves. And then along with that, I would say, make sure you are keeping abreast with some of the new things going on. I mean, Fractal has a very unique way of going about things in helping farmers to potentially expand their operation, and some of the new products and other things that are coming out, that such as what Sound is doing. I mean, there's some the ag industry is changing pretty rapidly, and farms need to be changing themselves in order to keep up with those industry changes.
I appreciate that, Dave. I want to get there. I want to, one quick question for Kyle though, because I want to reconcile two things that I think might be hard to reconcile, at least in my mind, which is number one, these are where the opportunities are. We got to keep looking for the opportunities, even though we're in this downturn that could last 3-4 years. But number two, we're trying to afford discs when before we were we're trying to afford disc blades when before we were affording discs. How do you sort of reconcile those two things of like, now's the time to grow, but I can't, afford disc blades when before I was buying discs, to use your analogy?
So the fact of the matter is that if you're just now thinking of this, and I say this as humbly as possible, if you're just now thinking of this, it's too late. You need to have had some thought process along the way to have said, gosh, when times are really good, I didn't go out and buy a new disc because I wanted one. I only bought the one that I needed, right? And so to have yourself well positioned for, I shouldn't say it's too late. That's a little bit harsh. You just have to be probably positioning yourself all the time for these things to keep powder dry. And so one thing I want to be real clear about is that growth it can be defined differently for different folks. For me, it is revenue growth, not necessarily purchasing of land. Purchasing of land is what I do with my profits, and so that's my investment strategy. But purchasing land is not a growth strategy for me. That's more of an investment strategy, and it's important, I think, to understand where you are on that curve. because it is two very different things. But the point I'm trying to make through that is, keeping powder dry, keeping options open, participating in unique programs that may can have either a way to either reduce your cost or increase your revenue. In my mind, farmers can do a great job of cost cutting, but we're not always as focused as we ought to be on the revenue side of the business. And I had a guy joke with me one time in a different industry. He says, "I just don't understand you farmers." He says, "You will spend 3 weeks beating up a supplier for 25 cents a gallon on Roundup, but you won't spend 15 minutes a day on your marketing strategy," which is really more important. And so, I'm very guilty of that as well. But the analogy is correct. It's much more fun to work on figuring out how to have a increase the top side of your business versus cost cutting on the bottom side.
And how if at all has that changed for you in this environment? Does that change your marketing plan? Does it impact it in any way, or does it kind of stay the course as much as possible?
Yeah, for me, marketing is always a risk management strategy, and in leaner times, I think that actually we probably bolster the managing the risk even more. So I'm not willing to take as much risk, and sometimes signing up for a smaller loss is the best thing that you can do. And boy, that is hard. Boy, it is hard to put together a strategy to say, I'm going to lose, but I think I'll lose less than I would in a different strategy. That's really, really hard.
Sorry, I was muted there. Well, let's bring Brian in. Brian, both Kyle and Dave have mentioned Fractal. Can you maybe talk about what that has looked like for working with Kyle, and what in general, for those who might be hearing about Fractal for the first time, that might look like?
Yeah, sure. Fractal's an incentive aligned investor partner, and the whole onus behind it is to keep the farmer in control and keep the farmer in ownership, and just to reduce that competition between the farmer and the investor. I think Kyle and I have had a ton of conversations. There's been a bunch of stuff in this conversation already that I think is reflective of that. But I would say, when I think about our relationship with MBS Barnes and with Kyle in particular, inside of that organization, it is about providing more opportunity and another tool with which he can make these investments into his business, whether that's with land or whether that's in other, on infield improvements or infrastructure. It is up to Kyle on where he wants to put that Fractal investment. But I think at the end of the day, we as Fractal look at this as a long-term relationship and a long-term partnership. And, there's a lot of trust and that goes into that. So, we want to make continued investments into Kyle and the business, because we believe that Kyle, like all of our other Fractal farmers, are great operations and going to be farming well into the future.
And Kyle, what is working with Fractal look like for you? Give us just the kind of the basics of what that arrangement has been.
Yeah, so it's a difficult concept to grasp, and I'm a bit of a slow learner, and so Brian has had to club me over the head with this concept several times. And I think at one point we were where we were talking about almost every call, he had to end the call with saying, "Kyle, remember, this is not debt equity. This is not debt equity. This is not debt equity." But it's really it's kind of like the concept of saying that. Would I rather own, 50% of 10 farms or 100% of one farm? And the fact is that I would rather and have control of them all. And so, fractional ownership of farmland is a difficult concept to get around, and even harder to have a pathway to do it. And I would have never dreamt up the way Fractal has approached it, but it certainly seems to make some sense to me. Again, it's not for every deal every time, But like Brian mentioned, I really see it as a valuable tool in my toolbox and a way for me to, even in tough times, be able to capitalize on an opportunity that may be across the fence from as an investment. The reason that farmers are typically willing to pay a little too much for the farm across the fence is because it's worth it. It's never going to be for sale again, or it really comes down to relationships maybe you've had for years and years and years, and then all of a sudden dad passes away and he was 92, and the kids are 70 and they're not interested in maintaining ownership of a farm. And it always seems like those types of opportunities come along when I'm as out of position as deals come when there's no money, and money's there when there's no deals. And so Fractal is something that is a tool that can be there as something to have some dry powder to capitalize on those opportunities, because typically those opportunities are quick. They don't get a lot of time to put yourself in just fabulous position. Not all those stars always align. And so it took me a while to get the concept that what I needed to do with Brian is to have deals already put together with him and then execute against those, and then just have that powder waiting, knowing that at some point there will be a deal to a new farm or a new deal to look at. And we've already done all the homework and already done all the background with Brian to have those funds available to execute against.
And Brian, were you going to add to that?
Yeah, I think if I can maybe sum it up simply, it's and this is something Kyle and I have talked about. It's say yes more often, or being able to actually take a shot more often. So I think what Fractal really opens up for a farmer is options in investments that they would have passed on in their business in previously before Fractal exists. Now you can actually sit down and take a look at that investment in a different way and say, all right, can I actually make this happen with Fractal? Because before I know I couldn't, I would just had to have said no. So it's not about saying yes every time, but it's about really taking a look at your business and understanding where to invest and why, and then really opening it up and I guess putting that investment where it needs to be when it needs to be, because Fractal gives you that option versus just a simple yes.
For sure, that's something that I maybe didn't emphasize, is that you need to make the investment for the same reasons that you would anyway, even if Fractal didn't exist. It just happens to be an additional tool that allows you to be in position to capitalize when there really is an opportunity if you were out of position. Is that well said, Brian?
Yeah. I mean, it's what do you always say? The best time to buy. You never know when a land deal is going to come, and we're just talking about land. We talk to a lot of folks about a replacement for a sale leaseback or tile investments or irrigation investments or whatever that might be, using equity. But at the end of the day, when you look at just pure land in general, which is still transacting even in this downturn, and probably even more so in the private market, but you don't know when it's coming, so you can't really control that aspect of it, which has beat into me. But you can control your preparation to make those investments they can come down the pipe. And I think that's something where we like to be with operations. Let's get prepared and get ready.
Absolutely. Yeah, hearing a lot of being proactive and managing risk before it's too late, and both on the landlord side, but also on the growth or investment side as well. I want to get to the big one, the one when we asked our first poll question, what everybody's most concerned about in 2025. It was input costs. So I want to make sure we get there. We are on the home stretch of today's webinar. We're going to end it around the hour mark. So if you have any questions at all, now is your time to put your questions in the chat. They could be about something we've discussed or something we haven't discussed. But Kyle, set the stage for us on input costs and how you're kind of managing this environment when it comes to trying to protect margins.
Yeah, certainly, certainly. And so I keep coming back to the analogy of the disc blades, right? And so this is a time when, from an input side, you know, if some was good, more is better. Maybe isn't the best mentality for us to have right now. We have to be really precise and precision based as to what inputs we truly do and don't need. And you know, and so it's probably lent us to think of maybe different and more innovative ways to approach the input side of our business, because if we just your inputs stay pretty flat if you continue to just do things the way you've always historically done them. But if there, you know, are additional tools out there, I'm just a guy that, if you can't tell, I mean, I just like to have a lot of options in my toolbox, a lot of levers that we can pull to try to differentiate ourselves. And sometimes it's not about looking at your expenses and saying what's the biggest line item and how can I cut that. It's about looking at all of the small things. And I always joke and say, you know, a small number times a big number becomes a big number. And so if we can find ways to chisel, you know, just get base hits and chisel a little bit here and a little bit there, that just makes an enormous difference, especially when you multiply that across scale. So, you know, in leaner times, we need to think more about the $5 saving and the $5 revenue hits than we do the $50 revenue hits. Because if there was a $50 revenue or savings to be had, everybody would have gotten it already. I mean, that's easy. It's when you find the smaller deals or the smaller reductions or the smaller increases that you can put to your net income. You do find 4 or 5 of those. Now it really actually adds up to something that's meaningful, and those are more elusive, it seems.
Yeah. Can you give us any examples or specifics about how you've done that kind of this year, or anything that you've tried to put into place?
Yeah. So, you know, for example, one thing is that, you know, we've always been big believers in variable rate technology and have had the ability to variable rate for a long time. But, you know, it's never been to me about what the equipment or our ability to variable rate seeding recs or fertilizer recs or whatever it may be. It's always about zone management to me, about where do you decide to say this area gets 100 pounds more than this area. And so really to refine those zones and to have some science behind that has been really helpful. Then also to, and not as necessarily as a commercial for Caitlin, but I mean, kind of a commercial for Caitlin. I mean, to look at more innovative approaches, right? To what other products can we use that can get us the same net result at a lower strike price. And so the idea of the Sound has come with this, it's escaping me, but the Efficient Acre program, where we can reduce inputs by the use of a product like Source and not have a yield detriment, and they're confident enough in that they'll actually back it with their own dollars. I mean, that program to me is just the first hurdle you have to just get over is believing the science, which I am a believer. But once you believe that, man, that's just a no-brainer to do. And you know, you should have a lot of confidence in it because the company is willing to back it so well. So I'll let Caitlin probably talk more about the specifics of that. But that is that's certainly a program when you can reduce 25 pounds of nitrogen, 25 pounds of P. Again, a small number times a big number adds up to a big number.
Yeah. Talk about Efficient Acre, Caitlin, if you would. Did we hear correctly that you're reducing your nitrogen fertilizer and not having to worry about any sort of economic hit? You guys are kind of covering the cost. How does that work?
Yeah, so at Sound, one of the core things we're really focused on is how can we deliver this comprehensive solution. So for those who aren't familiar with the Source product, it is a signaling molecule that helps stimulate native microbes to deliver more efficient crop nutrition. And so in order to get growers to lean into reducing and optimizing fertilizer on their acres. Last year, we rolled out a guarantee program. So we're guaranteeing up to $100 an acre, no risk of yield drag when they're reducing. This year, we took that one step further with our Efficient Acre program. We're actually paying growers $5 per acre for reducing 25 pounds of nitrogen and $5 per acre for reducing 25 pounds of P. So up to $10 an acre in your pocket on top of that guarantee. So that's really speaking to some of those themes that Kyle talked about around how do you help manage risk? How do you deliver this comprehensive solution? And for us, it's really about what can we do that's in our control in order to drive the practices and drive the outcomes that we're looking to do with our product. So we're pretty excited. We think it's a unique opportunity. The incentive side of that is capped this year to help manage our risk. So it is first come, first serve, but we're seeing a lot of interest right now, especially growers who were on the fence, maybe considering reducing because of input prices. We're really leaning into that now because they have this option to de-risk that practice.
And when you say this year, you're referring to 2024 still, right?
No, this is
for 2025. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so it's capped for 2025. But kind of say more about how a farmer who perked up when they heard this might get involved.
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways they can get involved. One is obviously purchasing source, applying, and they get the guarantee and the incentive. The other thing that we announced this couple weeks ago was actually a partnership with Fractal. So it's an opportunity to start to actually think about how they can stack these incentives. So with that Fractal deal, not only are they getting those up to $10 an acre, but they're also getting a discount on their annual premium if they're reducing and involved in both programs. So it's a nice opportunity to start to look for ways to use that revenue. It's an on-road to carbon programs or other ecosystem asset programs if they're interested in dipping the toe in that, and really looking at both that upside and downside.
And Kyle, how's that look for you, the Efficient Acre program?
Yeah, so I'm a believer. I'm in. And it, to me, the theme for the downturn here really, Tim, is around if you can't tell, managing the risk and keeping powder dry. And these programs are tools that certainly help our operation do that. They're not the only tools, but they are really good tools that you need to have in the toolbox. It's almost we just have to think innovatively in the times that we're moving into, because to me that's the difference between being successful during a downturn and just surviving a downturn.
And Caitlin, maybe you could speak generally on the economics of this. So they buy the source product, but they're reducing, what's that look like in terms of, like, at the end of the day, how much are they saving by doing something like this?
Yeah, so the product usually goes for about $15 an acre. When you're looking at that 25 pounds of NNP, of prices today, that's about $30 in value or more. And that doesn't even consider some of the intangibles. You're building your soil health, potentially reducing a pass, saving time. And then you have that downside risk protection. That's up to $100 an acre and that $10 incentive. And they can actually go out. They're not signing away their carbon rights with that program. So they can actually go out and shop that out to other programs where nitrogen management is a piece of it. We actually had a grower do that this past year. They were reducing under that guarantee, and they partnered with a retailer in their area and got another $5 an acre payment on top for that reduction. And he maxed out his acres under the program, so enrolled 10,000 acres for Efficient Acre for the 25 season. He's going to go out and get that $5 again from that retailer. So that'll cover the whole cost of source for him.
Wow. And this partnership with Fractal, so do they have to have done a deal with Fractal, or just be kind of enrolled with Fractal, or how does that part work?
Yeah, so these are acres that are applying source and have a deal with a Fractal, because it's a discount on their annual payment for them. So it's 0.2% off for reducing N and P for both N and P, so 0.4 altogether. Okay,
great. Kyle, we did have a question come in from attendees here. It says, how do you feel about land appreciation in the near future and the ability to buy out your Fractal contract ownership in the future? We see a 30 to 40% land appreciation in the last 2 years in recent land sales prove it's not slowing down or reversing. So the heart of the question here is, all right, you've done a deal with Fractal, so for fractional ownership with the understanding that you will be buying Fractal back out. How are you feeling about that, watching land values go up, if I'm trying to summarize there?
Yeah, no, that's a great question because as a farmer, I'm that guy that is talking to my supplier for 3 weeks about how to get another 25 cents off of Roundup, and so Brian is no different in that. I'm clubbing him over the head to say, hey, how can we reduce this? And so, in my mind, I've finally come around to the idea that I'm not sure that I ever want to buy out Fractal's share of this. It is a 10-year. It does have a length of a 10-year arrangement. I can buy it out, in a shorter time frame than that. But I think that I can see myself just wanting to renew that contract in perpetuity, so that I can do it again and do the next one and do the next one and do the next one, because I think that the opportunities will continue to come. It'll just be, how well positioned I am on those things. But to answer the question, as far as, if I see land, my opinion about land appreciation right now over in the short term is that I see this thing maybe not necessarily weakening, but maybe flattening off for a bit. And I'm fine with that. And so in the event that I would want to buy out my Fractal position, if it's flat or even if it's up, or if it's down, those are actually, I'm rooting for it to go up, because I have more land position than what I have, with Brian at Fractal. So that means that my portfolio has grown. Not just the cost of buying out Brian on the piece that I have done with him. And the fact is that if I've been diligent about it and I've taken the monies that Fractal has given me and reinvested it in the next land deal, it's a net same position. The new piece that I bought appreciated at the same rate as the piece that I committed in the Fractal agreement.
Yeah, Brian, anything to add to that from the Fractal side?
Kyle just said everything I would have said. So I think that was perfect.
Cool. Well, I don't want to leave the inputs conversation quite yet. I know we're getting to the point where we'll wrap up, and I want to give each of the 4 of you a chance to just provide some final thoughts at the end of the webinar. So start those brewing now. But Kyle, obviously we talked about a fish an acre. Anything else on the inputs mentality or your approach to inputs in this environment that we could share with those in attendance?
I think that farmers get inundated with a lot of new products, and especially in the biological space, especially in the microbial space, it's like buyer's fatigue. And so you have to sort the wheat from the chaff there a little bit and say, okay, here's the companies that I believe in, not only in the product, but maybe in the mission vision of the company, the core values of the company. I think that that is important to look at as you're looking at more innovative ways to reduce input costs with products and practices that you maybe haven't done before, right? And so there's a level of trust that you have to have there to move into something that's unfamiliar to you. But I would just encourage folks that this is as farmers, I think historically we do our best work when our back is against the wall, and so now it's becoming a time for us to do our best work. Right? Let's be the best business people that we can be as the times are tougher, and so that means maybe looking and doing and creating things that we haven't historically done or is not necessarily in our heritage. Right? And another thing that I think in downturns here is that we have a tendency to dial back as many expenses as we can during this time, and we do have to be frugal. But I have a lot of advisors, a lot of smart people we're trying to surround ourselves with, and the time in difficult times, that is not time to back away and to meet with those folks and seek advisement less. It's a time to do it more and almost create like a the circle of trust of folks that you can go to and really seek advisement, because you don't have to be the lone ship out here in a difficult time, because no one has all the answers, but someone probably has an answer around specifics, and that's again, that's just having tools in your toolbox, like if it's a Fractal or a Sound or whoever it is.
That's really well said. I know, just from personal experience, when things get tough, my tendency is to kind of like retreat to my shell, right? And it does take a lot to get out there and keep looking for what others are doing. I appreciate you sharing everything you're doing today on this. Had a question come in for Caitlin, and I have to admit that this is beyond the level of my understanding. So maybe you'll get this, even though I don't. It says, does Sound's nitrogen reduction product help qualify for 40B and future 45Z production for corn production?
Yeah, so for those who aren't familiar, the 40B guidance that was rolled out earlier this year really looked at a climate smart ag pilot. It was bundling cover crop, no-till, and enhanced efficiency fertilizers. So under the current guidance, source is not an EEF. What I will say is there was comments period for a 45Z RFI over the summer, universally across the board, whether it was a environmental group, a retailer, fertilizer producer, everyone is advocating for unbundling those practices and broadening the set of practices a grower can adopt to qualify for that program. So I do see that as the trend. Under the GREET model, which is the likely backbone of how those credits will be issued, reducing fertilizers about 2 to 3 points off your carbon intensity score. So I do see it as an unlock in the future. Under 40B guidance today, it's not qualified as an EEF.
Very cool. Thank you for sharing that. Great. Well, let's do quick takeaways for everybody, and we can get everyone on with their day here. Want to give everybody a chance, but Dave, I think it's been a while since we got to you, so let's have you start off our quick takeaways before we finish up.
Something that Kyle alluded to earlier, which I think is very important, particularly given the theme of this discussion, which is protecting margins and preserving cash. He alluded to a financial analysis, and that's something we recommend that farms do every year. That is something that we help farms with, but even if it's not through us, that's something that really needs to be done. And along with that is there are still way too many farms that are doing only cash-based accounting, and they're not doing accrual accounting, and that's just flat out necessary for improved management and decision making on the farm. So those would be a couple of things, along with benchmarking, and then also getting involved with a peer group. Kyle also mentioned or alluded to surrounding yourself with advisors. Those advisors are not only professionals in their own area of discipline, but those advisors are also good solid peers who are in the trenches along with you and can be a tremendous sounding board.
Great. And Brian?
Yeah, I would say, we've talked a lot about protecting your cash position, and on the other side of that coin, or maybe along with that, there are still places to invest, still good investments to make. What that means with Fractal is just starting the conversation. I think it's better to work with people that you know, especially when you're talking about a long-term relationship. And, we want to be, side by side with every partner that we have. And, I think that's the best way to start and continue into these partnerships. We're happy to be, and just a quick piece, we're happy to be partnering with Sound. I think for us, as a farmer invests in that field that we're invested in, we want to invest alongside them, and we see that Source as an investment in that field, and that's why we offer that discounting program, details of which I'm happy to get into. If anybody wants to know more about that, just give me a call. But it's all about investing alongside the farmer.
Yeah, and actually, you reminded me there, Brian. We have one more poll before the end of the hour, so we'll continue with Caitlin and Kyle's takeaways. But let's throw that poll up if we can. If you're at all interested in hearing more about any of the companies that you heard mentioned today, Fractal, Sound, or Uncommon Farms, go ahead and fill out that poll. I don't know that it lets you do multiple options, so if it doesn't, choose one and then reach out directly with the other two that you're interested in as well. But go ahead and finish that poll up, and we want to reach out to you. But we'll continue on with takeaways since we're getting right to the hour here. But Caitlin, go ahead.
Yeah, so I saw a headline the other day. It was farm for value, not just for volume. And I think that is the key theme of the upcoming growing season. And core to that is focusing on productivity. How do you do more with less? I think, as Kyle pointed out, if you're not thinking about this now, it might be too late. That's a huge opportunity with fertilizer. We saw price volatility in 2022. Every year it seems like there's some new supply shock or access issue or some new headline like the fish kill in Iowa that happened earlier. Who knows what the regulatory environment is going to look like? Who knows how these carbon market landscapes are going to evolve? But it is an opportunity for growers to really dial in those inputs, optimize that fertility program, and then potentially take advantage of upside. And there's solutions out there that can protect your downside risk and potentially provide more on the upside for you. So we're excited for the opportunity and looking optimistic about the season ahead.
Yeah, well said. Value, not volume. I like that a lot. And Kyle, you get the final word. You've been on the hot seat pretty much the whole hour, so we're gonna let you get the final word here.
Sure. I don't have a lot of other, words of wisdom, Tim, other than to say, this is the environment that we're in. Probably provides us an opportunity to be farmers are eternal optimists. I'm no different, but it also gives us a chance to probably be as humble as we've ever been, be as diligent as we've ever been, be as innovative. I truly believe a farmer, when they are pressed into duty, is the best manager in the world, and this time will be no different. We'll be innovative and really faithful. But I mean, this probably the important thing is we're in the harvest season. I just say, just absolutely be safe. There's been a few tragedies in our community here in recent months, and just encourage yourself to be safe. Hug your kids every night, and just don't take the little things for granted.
That is a great place to end on. Thank you for that important point to put some punctuation on today's webinar. Thank you to each of you who attended live. I think the recording will be available at all if you missed some of it or you came in late. But particularly thank you to Kyle, to Dave, to Brian, and to Caitlin for taking the time this morning and enjoyed the conversation. And with that, I think we will wrap up today, but make sure you reach out to these folks and learn more. Hopefully you finish that last poll question, and make sure you signed up for all these email lists, because if we do another one of these webinars, we'll want you back. But thank you all. And with that, we'll end today.